Maxed Out Man, helping you become the man you were made to be.
Hey guys, it's Kevin Davis from the Maxed Out Man podcast. This is episode number 40. I'm here with Dr. Chris Murphy, who is the owner of New Edge Family Chiropractic. He's a professional speaker, international best-selling author, one of which is the five foundations of remarkably healthy people. I'm hoping as we go through that, I hit maybe a couple of those, so we'll see. And is also the host of the Happy Healthy Hormones podcast. So, hey, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and share this knowledge with you. Like I said before we started recording, this is, kind of my, not necessarily wheelhouse because I'm not a professional at this anymore, but I love this stuff. So I'm super excited to learn.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, hey, that's your kind of brief LinkedIn bio, but give us a little bit more about your background, what you do. I know you travel all over the place. You've involved in a ton of stuff. Like me, you're an entrepreneur, which is kind of cool. And just kind of walk through that with us. And then we'll, hopefully we can kind of cover some of these foundations and give people some of that information as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was growing up, I grew up in a small farming town. My parents were farmers. My grandpa was a farmer. I grew up on the farm, and in our town, we probably had about 2,500 people in it, right? And so there was, sports was everything. There wasn't a whole lot else to do other than work on the farm and play some sports. And, as I got into college and trying to figure out what path I wanted to go down, although I loved being on the farm, it wasn't a big enough farm to support, multiple families. And so I started looking at other things and looking in healthcare, and my path was actually going to go down the road of dentistry. I was like, hey, that seems like a good thing to do. Like, my dentist only works a couple days a week, and he has a nice house and all these things, and it's like a good lifestyle. So I was like, all right, let's go down the road of dentistry. And so I spent my whole undergrad going down that road, and I just graduated from undergrad, and I was in that transition where I was supposed to go into studying for the dental exam and going down that route. And I ended up getting hurt. Long story short, I ended up hurting my shoulder. And at the time, this kind of limbo state I was in, going between undergrad and applying for dental schools, I was working for my brother at the time. And at the time, he still does have a construction business. And so I was helping with that, but I couldn't do that with a bad shoulder. And so he ended up talking to one of his buddies who had a buddy who was a chiropractor in the area. And he got me a job just being his chiropractic assistant, right? And so I did that for about 6 months. And that whole time, I told him what I was wanting to do. And they kept chirping in my ear because it was him and also his brother-in-law. They both practiced together. And they were always chirping in my ear that I should go into chiropractic instead of, dentistry. And I was like, yeah, sounds like a good idea. And I didn't really know what dentistry, or I didn't really know what chiropractic was when I started with these guys. I've been to a chiropractor a couple of times. When I was, in high school, I got injured, and my dad took me to the chiropractor, and I didn't really realize what it was. It made me feel better, and so I thought it was more like a pain relief thing. And as I started to work with these guys, I realized that it was much more than that, because I would see, people that come in with, chronic migraines that were affecting their sleep and their quality of life. Like, those things disappear. I saw people that had digestive issues that came in for back issues, and not only did their back pain get better, but their digestive problems went away. I saw, women that struggled with fertility and menstrual cycle issues, that those things disappeared, and they were able to get pregnant. Just a lot of miracles that I saw happen in there. And I started to realize, wow, this is a lot more than just about pain and helping people feel better. And so I was still, they had me hooked a little bit. They had my interest, but I was already so committed to this vision of becoming a dentist, and I got on all these different roles and put time and internships and all these things. I was like, no, this is my path, so I need to go down. And I started to go down that road, and I was studying and doing the testing and everything else. And I had taken the test, and I was doing fine, and I wanted to redo them and get a little bit higher score before I applied. And in that time, the docs had reached out to me again, and at this point, I was starting to question dentistry and if this is really what I wanted to do, just for the fact that one of the things they would always tell me is like, you just really want to look in someone's mouth all day long, and then they started talking about just the quality of life that chiropractors have versus dentistry as far as not quality of life, but their feeling of being rewarded and their just joy in their work. And at the time, I don't know if this is still true or not, but at the time, dentists had the highest rate of suicide amongst doctors. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe it's not everything it's cracked up to be. And so, long story short, I shifted gears, and I just kind of went on this blind faith, and I didn't really know still what to expect. I just switched gears. Like something just felt like it was pulling me towards that. And so I applied to chiropractic college and got in and went down there and literally packed up my dog, everything I could fit in my little Honda, and drove down to California. And, got there, and I kind of came at a bad time because it was actually their spring break. And so there was some people that I was living with that I found through the college, and they were also chiropractic students a couple of quarters ahead of me. But when I got there, it was literally like they said hi, and then they were gone because they were going back home for break. And so I was just like, here I am, alone in California, don't know anybody, questioning everything that I am doing. And as I started to get into the first quarter and started to get behind the philosophy and the why behind what we do things, and really helping understand really what chiropractic is, everything changed. And then I really started to see even more possibility of how you can help people and transform people's lives instead of just being able to help people with this area of their mouth, which is, hey, it has its validity and is important. Really could really help people with their whole body and their whole quality of life. And so that's when it shifted for me and grounded in that. And 4 years later, started practice, and here we are today.
Yeah, it's interesting because you don't really think about kind of this, work reward balance in dentistry, because what do you hear? Oh, are you flossing? No, I told you last time I'd do better and I'm not doing better, and you're fixing crazy stuff. And, and obviously dentistry has a component of health, overall good health and all that, which I don't think anybody, a lot of people don't think about. But I can imagine with chiropractic that it's, like you're saying, if you can, it's more of a wellness approach to the whole body, or a holistic approach to the body versus just let's fix this problem, pull this tooth, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. When people think of dentistry, one thing they do think about is they always think about brushing and flossing, right? It's always in the back of your mind. That industry isn't a great job of educating the community, and people sometimes don't even know why. They're just like, well, that's just what everyone does is we brush and floss our teeth. And it's a lot easier to take care of something like our teeth versus our nervous system, because every morning when you wake up and you look in the mirror, you're seeing your teeth, right? It's a cosmetic thing. People can see that. There's vanity behind it. People are motivated by that. But when it comes to really your true health, your quality of your true health is really a reflection of your inside, which you can't see. Right now we can see things like when we take x-rays, we can see if there's, warning signs and subluxation, which are interferences in the nervous system, or degeneration, bone spurs. You do an MRI and see cancers and all these other things. But it's not something that we look at on a daily basis. We look at our outside appearance. Maybe someone looks and say, well, it looks like I'm getting older, or maybe I'm a little bit overweight, or, these cosmetic things on the outside, but they oftentimes don't even understand what's going on the inside of their body. And so they're just constantly putting that off until one day it gets so bad, whatever the thing is, at first, maybe it's back pain, maybe it's digestive issues, maybe it's, some high blood pressure, and they go, it's not that bad. And they just keep putting it off until eventually, a crisis hits, or gets so bad they're finally forced to go to the medical doctor. And then when the medical doctor figures out what's going on, maybe it's now they're put on medication, or maybe they have to have surgery, or it's a diagnosis of cancer, Alzheimer's, or some debilitating chronic disease, and then it's a lot harder to get back your health. And that's what's really where the slippery slope comes down. And if we can start to be more proactive in our health, really look at that from an inside out approach, man, that makes all the difference in the world. But even when you look at even the industry of chiropractic as a whole, there's still a pain-based model. And and this is any industry, in any healthcare industry, there's still like that pain-based model. And then there's that holistic-based model. Even in dentistry, there are more pain-based doctors that are, it's, hey, pull the tooth, fill the cavity, and sure, brush and floss. But they don't talk about other things. When you go to a holistic dentist, they will talk about these other things like, okay, what's your diet look like? What else are you
Yeah.
doing there? Do we really need to pull this tooth, or can we do something different? They don't still do root canals oftentimes with a holistic dentist. That's something that most people don't realize. In holistic dentistry, they'll do other things because things like root canals can actually create more infection in your body that can have underlying issues. So like, again, every industry is different, but even in chiropractic, there is that pain-based model versus that holistic model. And so even if someone's looking to get health, and that's a good way to start with the foundation of your health, your nervous system, your skeletal muscular system, you got to understand, okay, are you just going to someone that's just going to patch the problem? Or are you looking at someone that's really going to help you get some long-term issues fixed and corrected as much as possible? Because you might be the guy that has waited until you're 60 or 70 or even 40 or 50 to start taking care of yourself. And you might have 40, 50, 60 years of damage in your body, but hindsight's 2020, right? And the best thing to do is just taking care of yourself now and moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting that people will have, especially if, and you can speak to this and disagree with me, but it would seem like if people aren't really using their body, like whether they're exercising and working out and, versus like, all I do is walk from my couch to the refrigerator, maybe to the car, maybe walk a little bit to the mall after I park as closely as possible.
Yeah.
Like they're not actually putting their body under, much strain. So it seems like you could kind of avoid quote unquote correcting the problem until it just gets to where it's actually affecting your ability to sit on the couch. It's right.
Yeah, absolutely. If you don't use it, you lose it. That's so true. And there's even different degrees of using it, so people might say, well, hey, I walk every day. I'm like, hey, that's great. But maybe they're still 40 pounds overweight and they still have some other chronic issues going on. And while it's maybe a good place to start, it's a different level than doing a more high intensity exercise, right? And stressing their body more. And maybe that high intensity exercise has to start with them just doing like 20 seconds of a high intensity exercise and taking a 2-minute break. And then they finally get to the point where they can do a 2-minute intense exercise and then take a 10-second break. But the more we stress our bodies, and there's a difference between bad stresses and good stresses, but the more we stress our body physically, the more it allows us to grow, right? And in life, I think in everything, and probably something you've experienced in your life is the more stress we get, the more it helps us grow. And when stress becomes really chronic, that becomes an issue. But spurts of stress are moments of growth. And so whether it's a moment of emotional stress, some trauma we're going through, some life we're going through, it might be really stressful, but it's there because it's helping us learn and grow and get better from that thing so we can be able to adapt to that stress better in the future. Or when something else comes at us, it's not as stressful or equally stressful, we're able to handle it easier. And it doesn't rock us. And that's really important. And that's even like the activity you're talking about. It's like, hey, walking, great place to start. Then maybe push yourself from there, because the more you're able to push yourself, the more you're going to be able to grow physically, mentally, chemically from those things. And life will just be better. Not that you have to be an elite athlete to be optimal health, but hey, the more you can push yourself in all areas of your life, just the better your life's going to be.
Yeah, it seems like that especially, from whoever the loudest voice is telling people, okay, we have the fattest culture in the known world. I don't know what the latest percentage of 65% of Americans are obese. It used to be 50% or so. Like, number's
it's
probably
about 50 now. Yeah.
Yeah. So 50% of us are not like overweight, but like chronically obese. And so what the quote unquote experts say is, well, get out and walk 20 minutes, 3 days a week, which, like you said, is better than nothing, but it's at the same time that burning maybe 200 calories if you're a big person.
Yeah.
You go eat an Oreo or an extra pat of butter, then that calorie deficit is completely negated. As someone, I actually did a video the other day, just a short form video where I talked about, I'm 50. I've been lifting weights since I was 16. And I talked about, is being sore kind of a function of being active? And I basically, my stance, again, you feel free to disagree, is it is kind of like that delayed onset muscle soreness and all of that. I think the body is amazing and going back to what you were saying about stressing your body, the body's been designed in such a way that's just completely amazing. Because if you put additional stress on your system, your body is broken down, not completely, but at a microscopic level. And then what does it do? It literally builds you up so that you can face those again with the next time. So I think that's and that's with stressing and everything too.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you. If we're not growing, we're dying, in every other area of your life, and some people put really heavy focus on one area of their health. Maybe it's nutrition or maybe it's exercise, but they're forgetting those other foundations that we teach our patients. One of those being things like, we have the 5 foundations. It's function, which has to do with the nervous system and making sure that's functioning well, because that controls every organ, every tissue, every cell in your body. That communication is huge. We talk about food, which you were just talking about, right? We talk about fitness, which you're just talking about. But there's also filter, which has to do with toxins. We live in a day and age where toxins are rampant. I mean, we have the government spraying chemicals in the air to control clouds and weather. We have everything we eat that has a pesticide in it. I mean, right now, if you tested any single person in America's blood, about 90% of people have glyphosate in it, which is the active ingredient that creates so many problems with people's health, and Roundup, right?
Yep.
And so I mean, that's huge. And that's just a couple of things. I mean, we talk about our food, our air, our personal products. We have to be really diligent, and we can't hide from those things. And even if you lived in a bubble, or under a rock, you couldn't hide from it because you're going to get exposed somehow. But we just have to be diligent.
Yeah, because it's under the rock in the soil.
Yeah, exactly. I always joke about that because in our area when I talk to patients, because we live in an area where there's an area called Hanford that's really close in Hanford, Washington. That's where they developed the nuclear bomb and did all this stuff. And so there's a lot of cleanup from that. And so I always tell people, I'm like, hey, you can't even hide under a rock around here. You're going to be radioactive, right? So there's just so much, but we can't paralyze ourselves and paralysis and just do nothing, but we can do things that are going to make a big difference in our life. So we can help lower that toxic load in our body. And then there's also the big one, which is really freedom. And that's our last foundation, but definitely not the least important. And freedom has to do with, freedom in our spiritual life, freedom in our finances and our relationships, just really that stress component, that emotional component that we think of a lot. And that's huge. And if we're not motivating ourselves or trying to make ourselves better in those areas of life too, then we're just going to regress into our old bad habits. And I got to work on those better than anyone, because man, I can fall back into bad habits really quickly. Whether or not just be the fitness or the nutrition, the ones we think of, but just the daily habit stuff, the things that control our mind, that our positive thinking, all that aspect of it is key. So filling our bodies with good mental food is as important as the physical food we put in our body. Because if we're always on Instagram and social media and all these things and watching the news, it just fills our mind with fear and bad information and agendas and propagandas and everything else. And man, it can break you down faster than anything.
Yeah, which, I mean, this time that we live in, I mean, that's constantly bombarding, so that freedom component's interesting. I kind of keep an eye. So Michelle, my wife, and I, we've been married for 28 years, which is kind of a side note, but we are, she's got me training for a 10K, and this 10K is this weekend. We've done, full marathons, half marathons, and I'm really top heavy. I am not built to run. I build muscle in my upper body. I've got relatively lean legs regardless of, and I don't skip leg day. it's just how God designed my body. But I track a couple of things that I find interesting in regard to what I'm eating and my stress levels. So we can go out and do just a training run. I did a 5.5 mile run on Saturday, which is kind of the last long run before this race.
Yeah.
And I woke up that day, even though I was traveling, I traveled over the weekend and had less sleep than I wanted. I woke up feeling really good mentally and emotionally, kind of excited. And that run, I did a 9-minute and 15-second average mile, which for me is is fast. I'm not fast by any means. But like the week before, I'd been stressing about some finance stuff, and I run multiple businesses and all that. And even my little 2-mile run was a total struggle. Like it just sucked. So that's kind of one of my barometers. But interestingly enough, so as a 50-year-old, one of the things we deal with is prostate kind of health and BPH and just minor stuff. And it's funny because I can use my prostate, and this sounds really weird, but maybe you can tell me I'm not as weird as I think, but I use that as a barometer for the inflammation, overall inflammation in my body. It's like, hey, how am I peeing? Is it good today? Is it, and I'd be like, oh, well, it's kind of, it's not as good as it should be. And I was like, well, we had a cheat meal yesterday and I had a bunch of white bread, or whatever. And then that causes that. So I'm kind of all over the place. To your point about Roundup, it's really ironic that they've literally designed food to make it, or design agriculture so that they can saturate as much Roundup as possible to grow the food, right? Like that's just kind of an interesting thing. So I just threw a bunch at you, so feel free to go do your thing. But
no, I think you're on track. We can all have indicators in our own life when we know we're stressed or we know we're not functioning optimally, right? So for you, like talking about this PSA levels and your body's more inflamed. Absolutely. Any test we do, it's really a marker of inflammation in our body, because when our body is at dis-ease, not disease, but dis-ease, not functioning optimally, that's going to create inflammation in our body. Our body's response to try to adapt to this stressor on our body. And then eventually, if that dis-ease and that inflammation stays there long enough, well, then that develops into disease as we know it in the common nomenclature, which is, heart disease, cancer, digestive, IBS, whatever it might be. And that at that point, it's really just a diagnosis, and the medical model that we live in, it's a diagnosis that the doctor can give you so that they can justify giving a medication and a prescription or giving you a surgery. And it's not a really good place to live from, because then we're in a state of always reaction instead of being in a state of really being proactive in our life. And so just like in everything, in any situation we come across in life, it's really not about how we react. It's about how we respond, right? So reactions can be just like knee jerk. We're going to, maybe it's just something like, I don't know if you have kids or not, but maybe you're. So like if you're boy or girl, or
I have two girls. They're out of the house, 25 and 23. So that doesn't mean the stress that they create has diminished that much. But.
No, right? So it's like, maybe let's say the scenario where, one of your daughters, maybe one day they're in high school, right? And they come home late past their curfew. Maybe it's like an hour past their curfew, and you have a knee-jerk reaction because they broke their curfew. They didn't talk to you. You don't know what's going on. You're upset. That interaction you have with your daughter could be a lot different, and the outcome of that versus how we choose to respond to it. And so if we just react, okay, maybe we're heated, she's heated, we're yelling, there's animosity there, it doesn't end well, and then everyone's mad at each other, and then it breaks down some trust. A little bit, but it breaks down some trust from both parties. Versus if we respond differently and maybe we just ask some good questions, well, maybe we found out that maybe your daughter was late because she got into a situation where people were drinking at a party. She tried to make the good choice and like get her friends out of there and drive them home. And maybe her cell phone battery died or something crazy. And it's like she was actually making the right choices and making good decisions that you had trained her and educated her and wanted her to make, and she was making them, but it was just that response that we had, right? And so two different outcomes just based on how we respond to situations. And so I think that's really important as we're going through our health, making decisions, how we respond to things physically, but also, really more so emotionally. And that's one thing that I think that I have to work on the most is how I respond to situations, because I'm a type A personality, driver, go, cut out the fluff. I don't want to hear the details. Just, get to the point and tell me what's going on. And that can get me in trouble, especially with my other team members too. It's something I've really had to work on over the years. And, as is having more empathy and right. And listening better and asking better questions and not having those knee jerk reactions, but just learning to have better responses to things. And it's helped me, and it's something that I have to continue to work out because it's not my natural state, right?
Yeah.
There's our natural states and there's adaptive states. Natural state, I'd rather, and I was reading this on your podcast, on your platform there, your website, and it was talking about how as men we're used to being isolated. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I actually, that's my natural personality. I was like, I would rather be isolated. I'd rather be, a recluse than be around a bunch of people. That doesn't feed my energy. Versus my wife, she's the opposite. She gets fed her energy by being around people, and it does the opposite to her when she's more secluded. And so there's always that happy balance around that. But my adaptive state, I have to be around people because in my profession, I'm always around people, and I'm taking on a lot of energy. Sometimes not bad, sometimes not good energy because they're sick and they're struggling, and maybe they're cranky and mean because they've been in pain for so long. And so my adaptive state is I have to be that more extrovert. And then when I get home, I can be more of the introvert that I want to be. So I think it's important people understand, like, there are adaptive states, there are natural states. Trying to live in your natural state as best as possible is going to help you with your stress levels. But knowing your boundaries too is really important.
Yeah, because I'm definitely both my wife and I are introverts. So, but it's funny because I always joke and say I am an introvert, but I play an extrovert on the internet. I have multiple public facing brands. I help with TV. I do all this stuff that is very most people don't believe that I'm an introvert whenever I tell them, but that's my natural state. Like, we live out in the country. I've gone 8 or 9 days without leaving the house, and I'm perfectly content with that. Like, that usually involves me skipping church on Sunday or something like that. But in order for me to go that long, but yeah, that's definitely not my natural state. Is I'd rather sit and have this conversation, or my wife and I go to dinner with your wife and you and have that, versus like I did a training over the weekend that had 15 people in it. And I'm working one-on-one with each one of them. And that's by the end of the week, like, I'm tired. Yeah. First of all, it was in North Carolina and South Carolina. So I had to fly out there and back in 2 days. But it's definitely not my natural thing. So that adaptive side it's almost like, what we joke and say, put your big girl panties on and just do what needs to be done. But what's the balance with that? Like, how do you, cause I know with me, I can adapt pretty quickly, so I can play that role, put on that role. But then when I get back, I don't regress, and it doesn't take me a week to get back to normal, just because I've learned that strategy. How do you do that?
Well, I don't think I have the perfect answer. I think it's probably depend on each individual person, and if it's men or women, that's definitely different. Scenarios on how that happens. I think for us guys, we can bounce back and forth pretty quickly. I think for women, it takes more time for them to kind of adjust back between and kind of re-nest and do all those things. I mean, for me, I just really try to make an effort of taking breaks and take intentional time.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you're enjoying it and learning a lot. If you're looking for extra help, don't forget that I do offer one-on-one coaching. We can talk through a ton of different issues. I can give you guides, guidelines, and logistical help to help you take that next step or go to that next level in some of the things that you're dealing with in your life. We also have some course content, some guides, and a lot of educational materials over at maxedoutman.com. For the coaching, go ahead and go to maxedoutman.com/coaching. And you can learn about that. And then just go to maxedoutman.com for everything else. Thanks for joining us. Now back to the episode.
One thing I learned from my grandfather, my father, and even just that generation is, man, those guys know how to work for sure. And that's where I learned a lot of all my work ethic, probably. But although I really appreciate that, the flip side of that is I see that generation didn't really take a whole lot of time for themselves to enjoy the things that they really are passionate about, or the things that fed them too. And so, I really have made it a point in my life to take time to stop and smell the roses, like experience things and go do some things. Even if that does mean, okay, maybe I'm not making as much money because I'm taking time off from work. money is not definitely everything. Money solves problems, but at the same time, there's a trade-off too. And so it's like, okay, are you sacrificing time from your family? Are you sacrificing time for the things that feed your soul? And you can just push and grind. And a lot of guys are really good at being able to do that and have the perception that it's not wearing them down. And while sometimes mentally it might not be, physically it definitely is. Like there's give and take, right? Like you might take a medication to take away a symptom of a problem you have, but guarantee it's breaking down some other area of your body, and it's going to create some other sin that's going to pop up. So it's just like the leaky boat, right? You can put your finger in one hole, another hole is going to pop up, right? And it's like keeps happening in our own lives. That's really easy to do. So for me, what I do is I just try to take intentional time. I mean, so my wife and I, we're very intentional about planning out not just our day, but our weeks, our quarters, and our year. And so one of the things that my wife and I do on a macro level, I'll kind of do from the macro level and work down if that works for you guys. And so like every November, usually we're pretty consistent in November. Usually we do it over Thanksgiving weekend. Sometimes it goes into the first week of December, but definitely like about a month out before the new year starts is we sit down, we do a little retreat. Sometimes it's just, we go do a little staycation. So we might just get a babysitter and go to a hotel and just close ourselves off, and we will focus on our year. We'll go over what we want to accomplish that year. We review our past year and like, hey, what were our goals as a family, individually as well? What did we hit? What did we not hit? If we didn't hit, okay, did we at least improve from where we were? Was that one thing not really as important in our lives as we thought it was? And so that's why we didn't do it. Why didn't we do it? And just kind of help see, okay, where do we come from this past year? And then, okay, where are we going? And so like, what are our goals that we want to do? Like, what are some bucket list things we want to maybe check off our bucket list? Or what are some things we want to experience as a family? What are some things we want to accomplish personally? Maybe we're off track on an aspect of our health, maybe working out or some other thing. So what maybe we have a goal around that. And so, we go around that and we take our time individually apart, we'll go to our separate corners or whatever, and we'll work through that. And then we'll come back and, we'll discuss those with each other and share those with each other and maybe help each other come up with some solutions on how to achieve that thing too, some brainstorming with each other. And then make sure basically that our family and each other are on the same page and we're moving in the same direction, right? And so that helps a lot. And like I said, sometimes we'll just do a staycation. Sometimes we'll like travel somewhere and go do it for a weekend. Since we had our little guy, he's about he'll be 2 years old in December. The last couple of years, we just done it staycation in our own home.
Yeah,
you're right. So it's just like whatever works for you. But like I think it's intentional to like get out of your home. It works better because you're not having the distractions of things. So you can really dive into that. We should literally just take 24 hours and then into the that night. We'll have a little date night, make a little date weekend out of it, right? So then from there, but we'll plan out. Also, the other component of that is we'll plan out our whole calendar for the year. So based on what our goals are and what we want to accomplish, we'll plan out our calendar. And so we'll intentionally, every year at least put 2 bigger trips so that we go at least a week somewhere, at least 2 times during the year to help break that up, to help recharge. Because even my wife, while she's a stay-at-home mom, like they need a break more than us guys do. That are
definitely more than you do, for sure. My wife is stay-at-home mom for sure.
Yeah, and so we plan out like our vacations. We try to take little trips too, so we'll try to block out certain weekends. So basically, we try to average it. So about every 6 weeks, at least, that we're taking some kind of little trip. At least twice a year, we're taking a bigger trip, and then also weekly that we have a date night as well, so that we can recharge that aspect of our life as well. And sometimes we combine things. And sometimes it's okay, well, we're going somewhere for a weekend, so we're not going to have a date night that week because we're going out for a little weekend trip. But like just having that balance, that's how I try to do it. Is we really try to plan that out, plan out our year, plan out our months, our weeks, and then every week we on like Sundays we sit down and we plan. Or not say plan, but we go over our week so we can see how we can support the other one. And we know what the other one's got on their plate too. Does the other one have a lot going on and they're going to be more stressed and they need a little extra support, a little extra help? Or, hey, when are we going to do our date night? Because, having kids, you got to be fluid on that, right? Because sometimes you might not get a babysitter on the day you want to. And so it's like just kind of planning those things out. And so we go over that week, and that way there's less surprises during the week. Helps keep the stress level down. Helps us plan better as well. It helps us stay on the same page. We share our calendars together, so we know too what the other one's going to do. Because I don't know about you, but my memory sometimes is about 12 hours. So either way, either direction. So we might go over on Sunday. Tuesday rolls around, and I'm like thinking about maybe coming home for lunch or something, and I'm like, oh, I better check the calendar. And, oh, sure enough, yep, my wife and little guy, they're off doing something. So if I came home, I'd be coming home to an empty house anyway. So, that would be the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so just those kind of things. And it really helps us to stay on track better and just more of a family unit, be more on the same page, move in the same direction.
Yeah, I really like that because that kind of expands on, obviously everybody that I know that has a successful marriage does date nights, and that's, something that we do. And it's not out, we're not always, we're not big on eating out because first of all, it's expensive. Second of all, and I'm cheap. Second of all, it's just, it's for the most part, it's difficult to eat healthily. That way we like the quote unquote cheat meal, which doesn't, we're not usually going too crazy on that, but like we'll make a date night out of doing our weekly shopping, which sounds really weird, but like just being able to go out and go do those things together and hang out and talk and all that. But I love the planning aspect of it. I'm going to work on integrating that into my own and like you may plan out for the year and all that stuff. And then you may get a speaking gig somewhere where you have to go. And so that I'm sure that changes.
Yeah, you got to make audibles in life because as life happens and, but we got to have a plan because if we don't plan life will plan us. And that's why I really get around this with our patients because if they don't make big rocks in their life for the things that are important to them, then life is just going to fill in with all the little crap that doesn't matter. And it's going to throw you off track. And so it's like, okay, if you want to get healthy, let's say you want to lose weight and you want to lose 20 pounds. Okay, well then you got to have some big rocks that don't change no matter what happens. So, working out X number of times a week and for so many minutes a day. So you need to make sure you're doing that. And those are big rocks and put that in your calendar. Make sure those things don't get disrupted. Maybe you need to meal plan or food prep. And so maybe on Sundays you need to do your food prep and that has to not change no matter what. You got to have those date nights and they get in there and they don't change no matter what. And so there's big rocks in your life, whatever your value system is important to do that. Cause I'm really big on values and like what your values are. And we have like our family values as well. The number one being freedom actually. And then we base our decisions based off of those values and same thing. I mean, if you don't have those values and if you're going to change your habits and create big rocks in your life and you're never going to create that new habit and it's just going to get filled up by other junk too. And so, I think that's so important having those habits and those big rocks, not letting things shift around.
Yeah. I love the idea of the big rock thing. That's something I've never heard before. I really like that because and we're not even honestly like the habit thing is people think, okay, well, I'm going to get in the habit of doing this for 12 weeks, or I'm going to get in the habit until I get to, whatever weight. And then they just go back to the previous lifestyle that they had before. It's something like I work out, I lift weights 5 to 6 days a week. I do cardio every day. Like it's just something, this is
part of it's part of your lifestyle.
Just part of what I do. I try to, I eat as healthily as I can. I got a little bit of a sugar thing and my wife's a baker. So that's, as a hobbyist. So we kind of deal with that. And the two of us do that. And, I go through all those things, but then, so that's like my baseline rock. But, sometimes I decide, hey, I'm going to do this activity or this trip or whatever it is. And I want to get my body fat down a little bit lower. Right. And so then I have to have a short-term plan to do those things. And so, but it's this foundational,
it's okay to be fluid, right? And no one's perfect. And so you got to have a plan though. Like you said, like you got a plan. If you don't have a plan, then you're just wandering through life and life's going to you're going to just move with the waves, right?
Yeah.
Instead of like anchoring down, like drilling a dock down like 30 feet into the ocean floor, a wave, a hurricane could come and it's not going to move that foundation. It might ding it up a little bit, but it's not going to move that foundation. We were just in Cape Coral, Florida for a couple of weeks, just for a trip to get away. And, I was looking at some of the devastation down there from the hurricane that hit last year. But there's like piers that are just gone, right? Like there's no walkway, boardwalk at all. But guess what's still there?
The support beams. Yep.
Yeah, those beams. That foundation is still there, and it's just so important. Like even if we get off track, like hey, at least if we have the foundation, we get off track. It's a lot easier to rebuild, right? Versus if those piers didn't even have a good foundation, it just wipe it out. Like I don't remember exactly where we put this pier, right? Like where do we even put the anchors? And so like I think it's the same thing in our life. If we don't start to build a good foundation, and once we get that good foundation, then when we get off track, it's a lot easier to get back on track. I talk about being fluid and having like basically showing yourself grace too, because life shifts. You might have these big rocks, but sometimes life does happen, but it's the consistency about it, right? And that's the intent behind something like what I'm talking about is the consistency. And consistency is where things change. Whether you're doing marketing for your business, it's not about being perfect at it, but having consistency in that marketing. That's what produces your outcomes. Or, when it comes to your health, it's like not that you have to work out every single day for those 12 weeks, but if you're consistent and you're maybe averaging 5 days a week, well, you're probably going to make some changes. Or, you talk about cheat meals. I like to call them reward meals. I think in your life, it's a reward meal because you do really good in some areas of your lifestyle. It's like, it's a reward. And it's like, hey, like you can do those things. You don't have to eat good 100% of the time. It can be 80% of the time. But right now, if it's flip-flopped and you're eating good 20% of the time and 80% of the time it's always your reward meal, then it's, it's a whole different aspect too. And so, like when we did plan this trip where we were going down there for 2 weeks to go on a little vacation, and that was this trip was like the longest consecutive I've ever gone on before. I think it was closer to like 2.5 weeks actually. And that was tough for me because I'm used to always wanting to do something, right? And to just like kind of step back and take that time to like literally just kind of do nothing and unplug is not easy. And, but there's some fluidity in that, right? And so like we had these 2 weeks, and then one of my colleagues called me up probably like a couple weeks before we were supposed to leave and was like, hey, there's this great seminar. It's in Fort Lauderdale. It's like 2 hours away from you. I think you'd really value, you get a lot out of it. And I was like, well, okay, maybe I would like to do that. And it's like at the end of this 2 weeks, so I'm like, okay, maybe I'll do it. So, I talked to my wife about it, and she's like, well, yeah, because then I can go visit my friend in Alabama, and I've been wanting to meet her, and so on the way back. And so, we made an audible, and so we still got like pretty much a solid 2 weeks we did get a solid 2 weeks of vacation in, but then we were able to do some other things too, and it's just being fluid, but we were on the same page with things too. So I think it's, important to just have fluidity in things and give yourself grace. But at the end of the day, you've got to be consistent and hold yourself accountable to that and be honest with yourself and saying, okay, am I really being consistent here? Or am I just giving myself a lot of excuses and letting a lot of excuses build up into things? And I mean, when I was on this trip, I'll be honest with you, I was not on my best game with my health. And people a lot of times will say, oh, you know what? I can't work out because I'm going on a trip. Well, you can. It's just an excuse. Like I probably only in the 2 weeks that I worked out or that I was down there, I probably only worked out maybe 4 or 5 times, and which is not my normal. But I was enjoying it. I had my family down there. My dad, my little guy, he wanted to go swimming every morning, and then then we didn't have family, so it was just me and my wife, and it's like a normal routine. And it wasn't an excuse. Like I knew what I was doing. I knew I wasn't doing what I normally do. But it was a trade-off that I was willing to do for that short period of time to create an experience with my dad, my son, and myself to just like absorb in that. And at that moment in my life, I felt that was more important to my health, having that emotional, like building a connection and memories and connections and all that stuff, than getting in a few extra workouts.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you're enjoying it and learning a lot. If you're looking for extra help, don't forget that I do offer one-on-one coaching. We can talk through a ton of different issues. I can give you guides, guidelines, and logistical help to help you take that next step or go to that next level in some of the things that you're dealing with in your life. We also have some course content, some guides, and a lot of educational materials over at maxedoutman.com. For the coaching, go ahead and go to maxedoutman.com/coaching, and you can learn about that. And then just go to maxedoutman.com for everything else. Thanks for joining us. Now back to the episode. So, and did you kind of have a mental battle at all with like, oh, well, I feel, because what I was telling Michelle last night, I'm like, it's 6 o'clock. I just traveled 3,400 miles in 2 days. I got in at 1 a.m, but at the same, so I'm like, I'm tired. I worked all day, even after getting back really late last night, but it's 6 o'clock and I'm thinking, why do I have this like innate pressure that I put on myself to still be productive, which is kind of, my kids always joke and they're like, I'm pretty sure you're a robot, because I have, like you, very high capacity for productivity and just kind of push. Mm-hmm. But even when I go on vacation, it usually takes me a couple of days to kind of, wind the RPMs back down to more of an idle. It really is funny
tough. You're saying that, right before I left on this trip, I was talking to a patient on the table, and her and her husband, they're retired, but they were leaving at pretty much the same time, but they were going for like 5 weeks to Portugal and some other areas there. And she was nice. Asking where I was going. And I was like, is that the longest you've been? I was like, yeah. And she's like, just remember, it'll take you a few days to get into your vacation mode. It always happens. Like I think her husband and her, I think they own their own business and stuff too. Right. And so she knew. And so I thought about it. I was like, yeah, you're right. It usually does take, before you really feel can relax, it takes at least a couple of 2-3 days before you're like, all right, like the business isn't going to collapse. Like things are going to be fine. But it depends on where you're at in life, I think too, and what your stress levels are, et cetera. I think it's okay with our personalities to still have some things turned on. Like there were a couple of days where I might not have done any business, but I would say most days I was probably doing something, even if it was just like a phone call, check, maybe tune in with a team meeting, just something, because it helps. Like on the flip side, if it creates more stress in your life, not doing the thing, then you got to have a little bit of that back in, because it helps create some balance in your life too. Because it's like how you're wired. So I think it's okay to, as long as it's not interfering with your planned family time on a vacation or things like that. Like I was doing those things when my little guy was down for a nap and my wife wanted to go just rest and relax by the pool and read a book. And I'm like, I can't sit and rest by a pool and read a book. Like I need to be doing something. So I was like, hey, I can work on this thing. I can check in with the team. I can make this phone call. And that actually energized me. It was just a little bit, maybe say like half an hour. And that was maybe just a couple times sprinkled out throughout, and it gave me more energy. So, and then like the workout thing too, was like my wife, she was working out every single day, and it was like, there was like that self-guilt, like, I should probably be working out too. But at the same time, it's like, okay, what are your value systems? Is it a short-term thing? Is it a bad habit? Is it a good habit? What other area of those 5 foundations is fulfilling right now too? So for me, I had to try something new. So I actually made a lot more of an effort to just try to do literally nothing, like let my brain kind of recharge, because we had a lot. We like slammed right before we left, like the whole month, like we were making some big changes in our offices and different things, and it's like go. So you just got to pull back, and it's not easy for us to do as guys to like just pull back and not do anything. And so it was a good learning curve for me. It let me realize like, hey, guess what? I can do those things. Not that I always like necessarily want to, but it was a good like emotional recharge for me, mentally, spiritually. And so, yeah, I think you got to be aware of that in your own life.
Yeah, it's funny because there's a meme that I've seen where it's got a guy that's like, super ripped and fit and muscular, and it says, and then it's next to another shot that is like this huge, like that same guy's gained like 30 pounds, and it'll say like, it basically is alluding to you think if you take a week off from vacation, and then it's got the same initial picture in the third slot, but it's like what you think is going to happen on by taking a week off from working out and what actually happens from taking a week from working out. Like your system is, it's not like and I mean, you may put on a couple of pounds if you eat like crap on vacation and don't burn those calories and all that stuff, but it's, it all does that. I'm fortunate or unfortunate, but I'm kind of a low sleep guy. That's how my system is naturally 6.5 to 7 hours. And I'm good. Like literally if I don't set an alarm, which I hardly ever do, that's my kind of sweet spot. Michelle, my wife, is more of a 9 hours, eight and a half, 9 hours. And so when we're on vacation, I get up, we do a lot of Caribbean vacation. So I get up, I do my walk on the beach, listen to my worship music and kind of have my quiet time and those kind of things. But then I'll go back and like check in on emails and check in on orders and see whether or not there's anything I need to be involved in. But then I'm free pretty much the rest of the day. And it works out really well.
No, that's good. You found some balance, right? And so people always talk about, you read about, hey, life balance and work-life balance and all these things. And, I think it's so individual to the person. For what works for you or me might not work for the next guy. And you just got to find what's going on. You just got to make sure that whatever your balance is really feeding your values, and not just your own values too, but hopefully your family's values, and hopefully your own values and your family values match up too. Because I think that's huge. Because if you have a different set of values, and you're doing these things, and they're feeding your soul, but they're taking away from your family's values and what's important to your family, then that's a problem, I believe. But
100%.
Like right now, you empty nester. It's just you and your wife. It's like, okay, you can do all these things before she wakes up. You don't have to worry about spending time with the kids or whatever right now. It's like, okay, you have that time and you can feed your soul, and it's a value to you, and it helps keep your energy up, keeps your stress levels down because you're not worrying about all the things that might be going wrong while you're on a trip. And then when your wife finally wakes up, great. Then you can roll and you have that intentional time and it works for you guys. And so I think everyone has to find their own balance, but I think it all has to start with the values. I always come back to that. It's like, what are your values? Anchor things around that, create your big rocks around that. Will there be your habits with your health, with your relationships, your finances, whatever. And it doesn't have to, your values don't have to be my values or the person that's listening to this. But then you create your balance around that.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the best formula for work-life balance.
Yeah. Cause I mean, at the end of the day, balance is this whole work-life balance thing is a little bit of a fallacy, because you at any point during the day, you're probably going to be out of balance one way or another, but you kind of come back to that equilibrium. Because, like when you're at work, you're doing these things, and, so like you're not feeding in necessarily other than like the support and, security and all that of your family. But then when you're at home, you're not working on work. So it's like, it's really more of like it's almost a teeter totter. A little bit with this work-life balance. And it's not something that you can perfectly align, which honestly, it's the up and downs that kind of make life and the teeter totter fun. In my mind. But to your foundation point, there's a biblical principle that there's a story, a parable that talks about building your house on sand versus building your house on the rock. And to your point about the dock and those support systems, if they just set that dock on top of the sand and then build long enough structures to reach it as the beach goes down, it doesn't even take a hurricane to blow that thing away. A high tide will carry that thing away.
Yeah, exactly.
So having that strong foundation, and I think it speaks to the freedom and the value system and all of those foundational things. I want to kind of and I want to be respectful of your time, but if you have someone that comes in, one of the things I talk about a lot with Maxed Out Man and just in my own life and just in engaging people is like, you have to, we all have a work with what you've got is kind of where that starts. And let's go from there and try to do more, be better. In my mind, we talk about, be who you were made to be. And I know in your bio, using your God-given talents and blessings to kind of make the most of those things. If someone comes in to your practice, they're maybe 20 or 30 pounds overweight and they're stressed and they have back pain, and maybe my wife had SIBO, which is, we learned a lot about the MMC, with that. And then, what's the first word of MMC?
You put me on the spot. I'm drawing a blank right now.
Motor complex. It's the something motor complex. Anyway, it's the, I can't, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Sorry. But like all of those things. So if they're facing some of these issues, kind of what is your like, hey, well, here's what we've got and here's where we start. Because there may be people listening to this that are like, yeah, I definitely need better balance. I definitely need some of those foundational things. I'm curious kind of what you tell people to kind of get them started. We're not here to diagnose and solve these problems, but where would someone just even get started?
It's a tough question sometimes in people's situations. For instance, somebody might live in a really rural area and they might not have the same kind of resources as someone that lives in a big city too. With that said though, there's some things you can do in both situations. For instance, if someone's coming into our office, then we're doing things to try to help them get to the cause of their problem. So we always start off evaluating their nervous system, because that's what allows you to adapt to stress, what kind of stress you're in. And that's going to compound into other things. And so a lot of times that can be the reason why you're not able to lose weight, or that could be the reason why you're having the back pain. So we look at that first, and that's where we start with that foundation, right? We start, okay, that's your foundation to your health. Let's see how that is first, because even if you start exercising or eating better or taking some supplements, like it might not do anything just because your nervous system is so stressed out that it can't adapt and do things very well with those other resources you're giving it. And then from there, then we can look at the other aspects of their health. And so, it might be nutrition. We might do some more specific things other than just nutrition or exercise. We might look at their specific things they're dealing with. Maybe it's a gut health thing. They got to start to repair their gut health. And obviously there's nutrition that comes around that. But maybe they have a toxicity issue too. And so maybe we do some testing for the toxicity versus the gut. Those are some big ones, right? And so really we just try to get to the underlying cause and like start to rebuild the foundation. And so I won't usually start somebody on a different body system program if their nervous system is shot, and then you get that first. So like a lot of times we'll start there and start to get that functioning better. And then we can start to do the other things and start to get them, the other aspects of their health, the nutrition, the fitness, maybe we need to get toxins out of their body or rebuild their gut health. And so it's just a dance. Now, if someone who maybe doesn't have that access because they don't have a doctor, a holistic doctor like myself around, maybe they have a chiropractor around, but maybe the chiropractor just adjusts and that's it. And it's just more of a pain-based model. Well, then there's a lot of things you can do online too, where you can find docs. I work with people online. I work with people across the country on those types of things too. Because a lot of times it's just trying to figure out, okay, what is the body system that's breaking down the most? And then what can you do to help restore that? And again, not just throwing supplements at it like you would a medication, because a lot of times people get confused by, they're going to take a medication and a supplement. They're doing the same thing. They're trying to cover up a symptom. And that's the reason they're taking that thing. Sure, the supplement's better than the medication because it's not going to have the bad side effects, but still we can get in this same hamster wheel where we're still just treating symptoms and we're never getting anything fixed. And so it's the difference between taking supplements for that reason versus taking supplements to help restore body systems, give our other body systems and organs a break so that it can start to heal it and repair itself to where you don't have to be dependent on those medications or on those supplements too.
Right.
And now there are some supplements I just recommend that everyone be on because we don't get them in the food supply chain like we used to. Like our nutrients is robbed of so much of the vitality that it once had that we just don't get the same kind of superfoods that we used to get from basic foods that we eat today. And so there's essential nutrients that just everyone needs, especially if we live in the part of the latitude that you and I live in. Like you're only getting the sun.
Oh man. Yeah.
Midday. First off, you're only getting like vitamin D, midday sun, certain times of the year. So like right now, that's already gone. Like even if you're outside the midday, you're not getting that vitamin D like you should be. So like vitamin D is one that I recommend for everyone to be on. Omega 3s are another huge one that we don't get, especially because that's so important for brain health and inflammation in our body. Our brain is like 60% fat. If we're starving of that, that's a big one too. And so there's just like some basic things we should be taking, but then sometimes we got to do some more advanced nutrition for people that have, chronic issues that are going on too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how would so if I'm obviously not in your area, are there certain things that I need to, because chiropractic is one of those things where, like, and I'm sure you face this kind of as an uphill battle in education, but you have the chiropractors that they're trained, but they like you said, they only do adjustments. So they maybe have the little table where they step on the thing and it drops down, and they do their 25 minutes and they go through the same routine with everybody. And then they say, okay, we'll see you next week. And then we're going to keep seeing you for the rest of your life. My father-in-law kind of has gone to one of those guys for a really long time. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't exercise, you don't lift weights, you eat like crap, and so, like, why do those things in absentia of all these other, why do chiropractic in absentia? How, like, if I want to find somebody that would at least be closer to the continuum of what you offer, how do I, is there a place to go to kind of find that, or Google search words, or, things to look at on their website,
Yeah, it's tough because, you're right. Like when you go into a chiropractic office, you don't know what you're going to get. It's all around the table. And that's one of the downfalls of our profession, is that there's so much variety in what holistic health is. And the chiropractic is this, you never know what you're going to get exactly when you go into a chiropractor's office. And so there are some things you can look for sure. Like if you're just looking online and looking at their website or asking them questions. I mean, number one is you want to find somebody particularly that does x-rays, especially like pre and post x-rays, because that's a sign right there that they're looking at the inside. They're not just guessing what's going on the inside of your body. So they're already taking a more internal look at what's going on. And they're looking for an outcome. So a pre and a post, right? Versus just taking the pre to find, oh yeah, there might be an issue going on and this is why you should do it. But then are they really delivering on the goods, right? So that's a thing right there. And then obviously too, you can look on their website and, okay, do they incorporate other things that you're wanting? I mean, are they talking about nutrition and exercise, or taking more of a holistic approach to things too? If that's what you're looking for, well then, usually that's going to be pretty apparent. Or you can just even ask them too, right? And like, no, we just do adjustments and we don't take x-rays, and hey, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're looking for that other level to get to in your health, that's huge. And then, do you have to go to a chiropractor for the rest of your life? That's a question I get a lot. And I always ask people a counter question, which is, hey, do you need to eat healthy the rest of your life? Do you need to exercise the rest of your life? Do you need to brush your teeth the rest of your life? And everyone always answers yes to those things. And the real answer isn't yes. The answer is actually no. You don't have to do any of those other things, only as long as you want the benefit of those things, right? And so a lot of times our patients, they'll choose to go into wellness care and do some kind of maintenance care, whether that's once a month or once a week, just depending on what works well for them, because they want to maintain their nervous system, because they want the benefit of having a nervous system that's functioning optimally throughout their life. And so that's key. But at the same time, if you're just dependent on just the adjustment, thinking that's going to be the magic pill, because that's how our society's been really trained to think, is that, hey, they're always looking for the next magic pill, the one thing I can do that'll just allow me to just ignore the other foundations that we talk about and just hope that's going to be the golden ticket. And while the adjustment is very powerful and keeping that nervous system strong is very powerful, if I have somebody who is constantly eating junk food, they're constantly stressed out at work, they're taking medications and they're getting vaccines and they're like all these other stresses, they're never working out, and they're just expecting the adjustment to do everything. And that's a tough uphill battle, right? And it's like, I could adjust that person until they're blue in the face, and we might get some changes with them, but eventually, man, that's good. They're going to hit a wall, or they're just going to regress backwards and they're going to develop some disease. So in anything, we don't have to do any of the 5 foundations of health, only as long as we want the benefits of those things. And that's why I say those 5 foundations are not a buffet line. Like, you can't just pick and choose what you want and expect right. The best results. You gotta live all those foundations, not perfectly, but just as consistently as you can. And then that's going to give you the best outcome in your life. It doesn't mean that you're not going to ever get a diagnosis of a chronic disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, whatever. Like, I mean, we have a lot of stressors in our life that keep coming at us. And while genetics are only responsible for less than 5% of a chronic disease, like, there's certain things we just are out of our control, but there's a lot that is control. Like 95% of our environment and our lifestyle is in our control. And so I'd rather, even if I'm only going to live to be 50 years old, I'd rather be able to live that best quality of life until I'm 50. Right? I don't want
Oh
to
yeah,
live. If, like someone's
100%.
like, "Hey, Chris, you can live to be 50 and have an amazing quality of life and do all the things you want to do up to 50, or you can live to be 80, have an extra 30 years, but those next 30 years you're going to have poor quality of life. You're going to be limited. You're not going to be able to do the things you enjoy, but you're going to be alive. Like you have a pulse." I'd choose the live to 50 and have the quality of life every time. And in our society, you see it a lot. Us guys, especially, will push, trying to make a living, trying to save all this money, have all these things to get to retirement, having this nest egg, but we've neglected our health and all these other things in our life. And then I see patients all the time. They spend those next however many years I have left trying to get back their health, and they're spending all their wealth trying to do that. So it's counterproductive. So
Yeah, and they haven't. I'm more of a, and I kind of went through a situation in my own life and my own family, and I was blessed to kind of turn all that around to where it's like money and wealth and success. Those are a component to help me live a life, not the other way around. And
yeah,
and I'm very thankful for that, because I have friends like, well, if I save 80% of my income and I never go on vacation and we never eat out, and I work 75 hours a week, and oh, by the way, I'm divorced, my kids don't talk to me, I'm 50 pounds overweight, I'm in chronic pain. It's like, first of all, there's an arrogance as humans to where we somehow believe that this mystical future that we're putting everything off for actually exists, and that somehow we have ultimate control over that. So like I'm 50, about to be 51 in December, and I could drop dead in January.
yeah,
So like, am I doing the things today to live the life that I've been given and make the most of it? Not recklessly, but make the most of it with my health and nutrition and all mental health and spiritual and marriage and kids and all of those things.
yeah.
Because I don't know if I may live to 100. Both my grandmothers were 102 years old. Both of them were
Awesome.
fit and happy, and their bodies just wore out after a while, just because of the miles.
Yeah.
But like, I want that. My 92-year-old neighbor is cutting firewood today. I can hear him out there with his chainsaw.
Yeah.
Like, I want that. I don't want to be 60 and feel like crap. So I think that's a great philosophy that you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's key. This last week, we went on this trip, and my parent-in-laws, they were supposed to come on this trip with us, and my mother-in-law did end up coming for a few days, but only for a few days of this bigger trip. My parents were able to come for like a whole week with us, and the thing is her husband was having health issues and wasn't able to come, and then she felt bad because she didn't want to leave him for very long or whatever, and came for a few days. And the same couple, they're in their second marriage, and so he had a wife that he took care of for years that was sick, and she finally passed away, and then he met my mother-in-law, and then they got married maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, and they're both retired. Like basically within a year of them getting married, they retired, and worked hard. He took care of his wife, like literally she was like disabled for years and years, and then he was taking care of her parents who are also elderly and having issues too. And so just like work, serve these other people, do these things, and never took the time for himself. And my in-laws, they talked about wanting to go to Hawaii, right, and go travel and do these things. But here they are 4 years later, still haven't taken that trip to Hawaii. Now he's having these health issues. They don't know what's going on with him, and they're already missing out on family things because of his health, right? And it's like not taking the time to, like you said, live life as we go through it, not waiting until we get to a certain point in life and then enjoying life. And while he started to take care of himself better because he met my mother-in-law, and she's learned from myself and my wife some things to improve her health, like he still had 55 years or 60 years where he wasn't living that way too, right? And so it's like, the point of that story is I just encourage people to not wait until they get to a certain point in their life before they start enjoying life is, like you said, like live life now, do the things that are important to you, live as best you can to your value system. And, just do the best you can to be consistent so you can have things you want and have the quality of life you want.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap this thing up. I could probably do a Joe Rogan level length podcast with you just because I find you super interesting. I know you got work to do. Hey, how do we find you? How do we learn more about you and what you got going on? I know that your book's probably on Amazon and everywhere else, so how they find that if they're interested. So,
yeah, the 5 Foundations of Remarkably Healthy People. That's on Amazon. You can check that out. You can also you can even email me if you have questions or anything like that. I'm an open book, so people can get access. It's Dr. Chris, which is this DRCHRIS at newedgewellness.com. You can always shoot me an email there if you want more questions or need help with something too, or if you want me to help direct you to a place to go in your area that you can get some help, and I'll do my best I can for that as well. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Dr. Chris, I appreciate you taking the time, buddy. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, take care. Thanks.
If you're looking to really maximize your life and become the man you were made to be, head over to maxedoutman.com and get your journey started today.